guy we have with us right now, he's a war hero. He's a father. He's a husband. And he ran for president of the United States. He's done my show before. He's a sitting congressman out of Massachusetts, and I have the utmost respect for him, and we really do appreciate him taking some time to join us. I'm sure he's extremely busy these days. Of course, I'm talking about Congressman Seth Moulton, who's joining us right now. Congressman, it's a pleasure having you on. It's been a little while. It's good to see you. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Brian. Thanks very much for having me back. And I mean, I literally say this every time I come on, but I'm not a war hero. Just did my job as a Marine. I appreciate your support for vets, and it's always good to be on your show. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know you're a really modest guy too. So we have so much to get to in a short period of time. Before I get to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, let's talk a little bit about yesterday. I wanted to get your thoughts on George Santos, right? Over 30 Democrats voted to keep him in, and I heard some of the explanations as to why. I want to get your thoughts on George Santos, and do you believe that he should still be in Congress?
I mean, look, George Santos is clearly a criminal. Now, we have a system of justice in America where you're innocent until proven guilty. I think that's why some of my Democratic colleagues took what they feel was a principled vote and said he hasn't been convicted yet, so we're not going to expel him. But that system of justice really doesn't have anything to do with the process of expelling members from Congress. There's nothing in the language around expulsion that says someone has to be convicted in a court of law. In fact, it exists specifically for colleagues in Congress to just say, you know what, you are so despicable that irrespective of what the courts may say, we're going to vote to expel you. And I think that George Santos meets that standard of despicability.
Listen, I don't disagree with you on that word. He is despicable. He's a proven liar. He deceived the voters. I'm with you 100%. But now let me ask you this to play devil's advocate, which some would take as far as Tlaib, who's made some incendiary statements, right, about Israel and the bombing at that hospital. She refused to take down that tweet. I'm not a Marjorie Taylor Greene fan, Seth. I think you know my politics pretty well. I'm on your side. But with that being said, if you out somebody like Santos, then what do we say about somebody like Tlaib, who I would imagine you don't agree with some of the statements she's made about Israel?
Yeah, no, look, I totally hear you. And there are a lot of statements that she's made both recently and in the past that I disagree with. But that's very different than being a criminal. Like, we have freedom of speech in America. In fact, a lot of Republicans voted to keep her in just because they said, we don't agree with her statements, but we agree with freedom of speech. The other practical reality here is that the motion, I guess you call it, that Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote to expel Rashida, that's like the literal text that we were voting on, was full of lies. It was just inaccurate. I know it's hard to believe, Brian, that Marjorie Taylor Greene would have written something full of lies. Sorry for my sarcasm. But yes, it was full of lies. So I'm just not going to vote for something that's untrue.
Understood. I have to ask you this, Congressman. How do you even deal with some of these people? I guess it's a larger question, but the Lauren Boeberts, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the MAGA Republicans out there that want to talk about drag queen reading to kids more than real issues that Americans are facing. What are your interactions like with these people, and how do you deal with them, and how do you even interact with people like that?
Okay, so two-word answer to your question, how do you deal with them? I don't. I literally don't talk to them. I don't work with them. You know, we're fortunate to have 435 members of the House, another 100 senators. So there's a lot of people I can work with, including a lot that I work with on the other side of the aisle. As you know, I'm one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. Very proud of that. Have done a lot of bipartisan legislation. But I'm never going to pass a bill with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm never going to work on something substantive with Lauren Boebert. I mean, she's the most vapid. I mean, she might be one of the most vapid Americans, let alone vapid American people in Congress. So you just have to pick and choose your friends around here, and they are most definitely not my friends.
I can totally understand where you're coming from. With that being said, let's now move on to the new GOP House Speaker Johnson, who seems to struggle to be able to separate church from state. I'm sure you have a lot of criticisms for the new speaker, as do I. What would you say about this guy in your interactions with him, if you've had any with him? And what do you make of that now he's now the new GOP House Speaker? I would imagine some of his views, I think you would agree, are very radical and far-right MAGA views that he has. What do you make of this guy?
I mean, look, he's clearly a very MAGA guy, a MAGA Republican. But let me start with the good, because I'm not just going to criticize my colleagues. I mean, I'm not just going to be a partisan hack here on your show. I know Mike Johnson, the new speaker, because his locker is near mine in the gym. And so I often see him. He comes down in the mornings. I don't think he works out, but he does use the gym to shower. So sometimes I'll run into him after my workout. And I've had very nice conversations with him. A lot of Republicans say he's a decent guy, you know, and that's not true. I mean, you can't have a reasonable conversation with Lauren Boebert, right? But you can have a very reasonable conversation with Speaker Johnson. And I did right after he was elected. He came in the next morning, just like he always does. And I said to him, I said, you know, look, I appreciated your speech. It was very humble. It sort of introduced himself to the world, but even to a lot of members of Congress who really have never heard of the guy before. He was really out of nowhere that he became speaker. And, you know, he clearly cares about his family. I mean, so that's all good. He even said to me, hey, look, I want to work with Democrats because I understand that the American people want us to do things, and they want us to do things together, even though we have different views on things. So that was how we started, like last week. But since then, I mean, he's really just kind of come out as a partisan hack. I mean, he's completely politicized aid to Israel. He wants to fund aid to Israel while at the same time making you pay more for your taxes. Now, I mean, I shouldn't assume that. Now, let me be clear, Brian, if you're a tax cheat, then you're going to benefit from his plan, because what he wants to do is cut funding for the IRS that's used to go after tax cheats. That means that all of us who do pay our taxes, which I assume you do like I do, that means we end up having to pay more. Right. And so he wants to attach that to Israel funding. So it's like we either vote to support an ally, or, you know, or we vote to just, you know, prevent tax cheating. I mean, you shouldn't have to make that choice.
Congressman,
so it's just, I mean, this is the kind of thing that just, you know, shouldn't, this shouldn't be a part of our politics. Like, we shouldn't be politicizing these things, and that those kinds of extreme views, you know, they're not helpful.
Agree. I'm happy to hear that you guys have had cordial conversations. That's nice to hear. But at the same time, as you know, this was a guy who wanted to overturn the 2020 election. I'm not asking you to be a partisan hack. I don't think you're a partisan hack. But he has some very dangerous views about, for example, the 2020 election, the brown nosing of Donald Trump. If he had it his way, as you know, he would want to ban abortion across the country and penalize women for having abortions. He's made statements that if you get an abortion, 1 to 10 years in jail. I mean, these are really crazy, wacky, far right, you know, opinions that he has. And, you know, to me, that's scary. That's to me, that's a danger.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I mean, look, Brian, in his first speech I referred to, where he's a really humble guy, you know, talked about his family and everything. Yeah. He also talked, I think, very movingly about American values, about the freedoms that we all enjoy and how important they are to us. He left out the fact that he thinks that those values don't apply to a whole bunch of Americans, you know, because you don't have the same freedoms and rights if you're gay. You don't have the same freedoms and rights if you're a woman, because he didn't tell me that he's, you know, Speaker Johnson is going to intervene between me and my doctor to make some of my healthcare decisions because I'm a guy, right? But for women, oh no, get out of the way, because Speaker Johnson's coming into your bedroom to tell you what you can and can't do with your body.
Absurd. What did you make, Seth, of him taking a knee with other Republican members in office and praying in the House chambers? These are the same people that have a huge problem with some professional athletes taking a knee during the national anthem. As you recall, the former president calling those athletes, quote, sons of bitches. So what do you make? And I know Democrats, I haven't heard anybody, and I don't think they would ever use that language to talk about those that are taking a knee and praying. But what do you make of that in the House chambers? I'm wondering.
Well, look, one of our fundamental American values, something that was enshrined in the Constitution by the founders, is separation of church and state. And that takes nothing away from people's right to have religious beliefs and to practice those religious beliefs. But you don't let it get into your job as a member of the government, as a member of the United States Congress, as someone who represents everybody, regardless of whether what their religion is or whether they have any religion at all. Yeah. And so, no, I think that's inappropriate. And look, there's nothing wrong with, you know, you can have your religious beliefs, but that doesn't mean you impose them on your policy making. It doesn't mean you impose them on everybody else. It doesn't mean you violate the principles in the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm with you. If you're just joining us, Congressman Seth Moulton joining us. All right, Congressman, let's talk a little bit about the tragedy and just what is going on in Israel, Hamas, and the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I guess my first question to you would be, you know a thing or two about what war looks like. What do you make of what is going on there in the Middle East right now, what Hamas has done, and just what are your thoughts on this situation?
I mean, look, this is horrific all around. And there are a lot of innocent people losing their lives. I mean, let's start on October 7th, the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. I mean, kids literally murdered in their beds. I mean, absolute barbarism. And of course, Israel needs to stop that. And they have every right. I think they have a responsibility as a nation to ensure their national security, to go after Hamas, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But how they do that, you know, how they fight this war against Hamas is going to really influence their success and whether they're ultimately going to win this fight. And I'll tell you that from my experience in Iraq, if they just go in and maybe they kill some Hamas terrorists, but they kill a lot of innocent civilians in the process, they're not going to win this fight because they're just going to recruit a bunch of civilians to join Hamas. And what you have to do in a counterinsurgency is give people a choice. You got to give people a choice and say, you either join the terrorists or you join us. And that means you got to kill terrorists, but you also have to present a better alternative. You have to present a political future that empowers these people, gives them something better than they have today, or else they're never going to join your side. They're never going to join the side of peace. They're actually going to join the terrorists. And
Sure.
That's where I think, I'm not sure Israel's doing that yet. I haven't heard Prime Minister Netanyahu lay out a political future. And we all know that Israel is killing a lot of civilians right now. So that's really problematic. It's problematic, of course, from a human rights, humanitarian perspective. No innocent civilian deserves to die. And a Palestinian life is just as important as an Israeli life. But at the same time, there's a real military problem with this too, which is Israel's just not going to win this war if they kill a whole bunch of civilians.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. It's so complex. Have you had any, because I think we both could agree 99% of Republicans and Democrats, for the most part, agree with your sentiment, right? We support Israel. They're our allies. We want peace. How do we get there? Israel has a right to defend themselves. What Hamas did was disgusting, but Israel also has a responsibility to not kill civilians or do everything they can to not do that. With that being said, have you had any conversations you could share with us? I'm curious, with a Tlaib or an Ilhan Omar or a Cori Bush about some of their stances on Israel. And if you have, can you share that with us?
I mean, look, I've had brief conversations with just really just one of the members of the squad. So, and I'm not going to go into it in depth here because I think that would, you know, breach the confidence that I think colleagues around here expected to have. But look, we obviously disagree about a lot of things and the characterization of certain things. But I mean, there are a lot of problems I have with things that Rashida Tlaib has said in particular that I think are just factually wrong, right? But at the same time, you know, it's important for Muslim Americans, Arab Americans to feel like they have a voice, and some of them see a voice in some of these people, and you know, I respect that, even if I disagree with some of their views.
When somebody like a Donald Trump, yes, I do want to bring his name up here, makes a statement like, I could end the Ukraine war in 5 minutes or a day or whatever he says. When Republicans make statement, and it seems like there's a lot of Republicans out there that are anti-aid to Ukraine, a lot. What do you make of that? And what do you make of Donald Trump? I mean, he says a lot of ridiculous things every day. Yeah. When he makes a statement like that, here you are, you served this country honorably and risked everything. And then you have a former president says, oh, I could just end the war just by making a phone call. I'm just curious, somebody like you, what goes through your mind when you hear Trump make a statement like that?
Well, you know what Trump ended in 5 minutes? He ended his service in Vietnam by dodging draft because of a fake bone spur in his foot. You know, that's the sum total of Donald Trump's service in the military. That's what he knows about wars. That's what he knows about national security. And fundamentally, that's what he knows. That tells you everything you need to know about his service to the country. He thinks other kids should go and serve the country, not himself. And so when he makes these crazy statements that just prove he's an idiot when it comes to anything regarding war or fighting or serving, like, I mean, you just have to ignore him.
I tend to agree with you, but here's something I don't think we can ignore. On a debate stage, I think it was the first presidential debate, the Republicans, they were asked, if Donald Trump is a convicted felon, will you still vote for him and support him? Except for two people, everybody else raised their hand and said, yes, I thought the Republican Party was the party of law and order. What does that say about where the Republican Party is at right now, that they hate Joe Biden so much, they hate the Democrats so much, that they would vote for a convicted felon?
Look, I mean, first of all, not every Republican agrees with that, right? And I represent a lot of Republicans in Massachusetts, and I represent them just as much as I represent Democrats. I mean, I literally work for everyone in my district, whether they voted for me or someone else. And I take that responsibility seriously. And there are a lot of Republicans I know who don't agree with that. But what it shows you, what that debate stage shows you, is that the leaders of the Republican Party right now are cowards because they're just scared. I mean, they know the truth. I mean, I talk to Republicans all the time, you know, like down in the locker room here on the Hill, who they privately despise Donald Trump. But then 10 minutes later, they'll put on their tie, go up and get on TV and you know, praise the living daylights out of him.
That is unbelievable.
So they're just scared. They're cowards.
Can you give me, I don't want you to give out names. I know you wouldn't do that. Can you give me an example of a typical Republican that is elected in office, could be a congressman, a congresswoman, who you have a conversation with and they'll say certain things about Trump, and then just give me an example. I'm just curious because this doesn't surprise me.
I'm thinking of someone right away that, you know, is to say, oh, God, rolling his eyes. Trump is such a disaster. You know, we do anything to get rid of him. And then, of course, he leaves out the fact that he's already endorsed him for his 2024 election.
That is unreal, Seth. I mean, it's so two-faced, right? And it's so.
I mean, I'd honestly rather deal with some of the more like the super right wing people who actually believe some of this crazy crap, because like at least they're being honest.
You think like some of the names that we mentioned earlier, and again, I'm not asking you to do that, but like a Matt Gaetz. I always thought that Matt Gaetz, he just wants to be the governor of Florida and he wants to make a lot of noise. And a friend of mine, Joe Walsh, who who ran for president, former congressman, he said a guy like a Jim Jordan who's never passed anything in his life, they're not lawmakers, right? You guys, there's a reason why they call you a lawmaker, because you want to put law on the books into effect and help the American people. But a guy like Jim Jordan has never passed anything in his life. You think that's kind of forgotten sometimes, where they forget what they're there for? It's not to make noise.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because look, the idea was you send different lawmakers from different parts of the country to Washington to have different perspectives on making laws. But what's happened is we've gotten a whole bunch of lawmakers who just want to tear the place down. And that's clearly what Matt Gaetz did. I mean, we didn't have a Speaker of the House for 3 straight weeks. That's never happened in our nation's history. And we've had a lot of crazy people with crazy views serve in Congress. You know, Joe McCarthy in the 1950s. I mean, this, you know, the whole Red Scare, you know, going after communists and gays and I mean, just a witch hunt, you know, right? That's what he's known for. But he didn't try to burn. I mean, he didn't literally burn the institution down. He didn't eject the Speaker.
Yeah.
But that's what Matt Gaetz does.
Sure.
Know? So, I mean, this is unfortunately the challenge that we have. Is there are great Republicans across the aisle that I can work with because we have different perspectives on policy, and we'll argue and debate over how to get something done. A lot of times we'll even agree on getting something done, but it's just, you know, okay, how do we get there?
Right.
Like when I passed 988, the National Mental Health Hotline, that's been so important, saving lives of veterans. You know, it's like the new, replace the old suicide line. You can call it if you have a mental health emergency anywhere, any cell phone. It's saved thousands of lives already. I worked with a Republican, an Air Force vet from Utah, conservative guy, Chris Stewart. We had disagreed a bunch of things, and we had some disagreements on like how this law would be funded, for example, right? Like how are you going to get the money to pay for all the people who answer your phone calls? So we had that debate, right? But we all agreed, both of us agreed on getting this done because we knew it was important for America. But you can't work like that with a Jim Jordan. And that's why he hasn't passed a single bill in his entire career, which, by the way, that's pathetic. Come on.
Awful. And I commend you for that bill. And you're helping so many people and veterans and so many people in this country. I commend you for that. A couple more quick questions for you, and then I know you have to go, Congressman, and we appreciate the time. How do you see this next year going? I mean, we're in unprecedented times where the former president, still the front runner for the Republican Party by a long shot, is facing 91 felony counts, 91, including breaking the espionage. I mean, there's so many different serious laws that he allegedly broke. How do you see this thing playing out? And you've seen the polls, right? All due respect to Joe Biden, but most of America, Republican and Democrat, do not want to see Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. So how do you see the next year playing out, and where do you see this going?
I mean, look, I came to Congress calling for a new generation of leadership in our politics, and I think that's the way a lot of Americans feel right now. I mean, I think that there's no question between Joe Biden and Donald Trump that one's an indicted criminal, and the other, you may not agree with everything. You might think he's a little bit old, but he's a good man who's trying to do the right thing, even if you disagree sometimes on his perspective on things. And I think most Americans can sort of see that at the end of the day. But look, a lot of people are just frustrated. Like, come on, we've got like hundreds of millions of people in America. Can't we get some fresh blood? I mean, that's why I spend a lot of time recruiting vets to run for Congress. I want people who understand what it means to serve the country, to come and serve the country again, in a way where, servant leadership matters, right? So look, I'm working on this, but the bottom line is, Joe Biden's our nominee. I think he's done a good job as president. I think he can do a good job for another 4 years. And the alternative is terrible. And as Joe Biden himself says, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. That's Donald Trump. He's going to take the country backwards. But having said all of that, I'm not going to tell you that there's not need for a new generation of leaders in our politics. I think a lot of us can agree on that.
Absolutely. Congressman, when I think of the word patriot, I think of people like you. I know you're a modest guy risking your life, though, for this country. I feel like the word patriot, especially from the right, is thrown out way too much. Example, I don't think if you throw your MAGA flag around on the back of your car, that makes you a patriot. And you alluded to that you want to get more people, more veterans running for office. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Do you think that just people throw that word around too much now? Like you're some sort of patriot if you go in front of a Target and harass customers and tell them not to go in there because you don't like some of the stuff they're selling that might be pro-LGBT shirts or whatever. I just feel like some people throw that word around where it shouldn't be thrown around.
There's so much just like fakery all over America, right? Like people saying one thing and doing another, or pretending to be something that they're not. I mean, it's all over social media, and yeah, that's happened with patriots too. I mean, we should take patriotism really seriously. It's fundamental to who we are as Americans, and you don't get to just be a patriot because you grab a flag or say something nasty about someone else. You get to be a patriot by serving your country. And that's what people should do.
And you certainly are nothing short of that. Congressman, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. I've always appreciated the times that we've spent together where you've come on. If you ever come back to Vegas, you're welcome back in studio.
Thanks. No, I love doing it in person, Brian. It's good to see you, though.
We'll take some calls when you come in studio. But Congressman, it's a pleasure. Great. You're welcome to come on any other time. And we know how busy you are. So thank you so much.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Take care. That's Congressman Seth Moulton. He is a hero, by the way. There's no question about that. He's a modest guy. Very modest guy. But I'm just going to say this because he is the model, in my opinion, of the people that should be in office today.